This week on The Other Side, the latest news poll by The Australian reveals the Liberal and National parties have seen men running a mile and younger Aussies abandoning the coalition parties in droves. Meanwhile, independents and One Nation are on the rise. One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts will join us this week to discuss all that. Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump both addressed the United Nations, revealing divisions on a number of key issues. We'll let you hear what they actually said. A US late-night TV show host, Jimmy Kimmel, hangs on to his job. We'll explain what all the fuss was about on that story. And Bettina Arndt will pop in to tell us about the plight of boys in our education system these days. Lots to cover. Let's go. G'day Cooper Petey, g'day Tawantin and g'day Australia. This is episode 428 of The Other Side for the week commencing Friday, September 26, 2025. The Other Side's your deep dive on the important issues that matter in Australia and that affect us from around the world from a different, non-left-wing perspective. We always declare our bias right up front so you know what lens we're viewing things from, and we always try to keep it real and give you the data and facts behind the stories that we cover too. We'll be taking our spring break next week, so no show next Friday night, but we will be back with episode 429 the Friday after, October 10. If you'd like to support us, pop over to our website at othersidetv.com.au or use the QR code on the screen. You can sign up there to help fund our work for less than $5 a month. Well, both Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and US President Donald Trump addressed the United Nations this week. They've finally spoken in person, at least, even though ALBO didn't get a formal meeting this week again. They chatted briefly at a UN General Assembly welcome reception, and we now have a date. They will meet at the White House on October 20 for a longer discussion. We're going to shut up about all the politics around whether ALBO could get a date with Trump or not and just bring you the important bits of the speeches made to the United Nations about the stuff that really matters. No short sound bites. We're going to play you some decent long grabs instead. The Prime Minister's first speech on Monday was not to the General Assembly, just to be clear. It was to the two-state conference on Palestine and Israel, and that was the day before President Trump's speech to the General Assembly. So ALBO was focusing a lot on Australia's recognition, along with the UK, France, Canada and Portugal, of a Palestinian state, something which has not pleased the Trump administration.
We repeat our call for the hostages to be returned immediately and with dignity. And we stand with Jewish people everywhere who feel the cold shadow of history's darkest chapter in any act of anti-Semitism. Throughout this conflict, Australia has supported calls for a ceasefire because every innocent life matters. Every Israeli life, every Palestinian life. Right now, Gaza is in the grip of a humanitarian catastrophe, and the Israeli government must accept its share of responsibility. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed. Desperate people, including children, denied vital aid. Aid workers killed, including Australian Zombie Frankham. Journalists killed trying to bring the truth to light. This comes alongside the continued illegal expansion of settlements on the West Bank and an increase in settler violence. Threats to annex parts of Palestine and permanently displace the Palestinian people. Such conduct risks putting a two-state solution beyond reach.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese speaking to the United Nations on Monday, New York time, Tuesday our time. Mr. Albanese told the UN that the world must choose a different path and break the cycle of violence.
Yesterday, Australia recognised the state of Palestine. We have been clear. The terrorist organisation Hamas can have no role in Palestine's future. Our recognition was predicated on commitments from the Palestinian Authority, reaffirming Israel's right to exist in peace and security, that Hamas turn over its weapons to Palestinian security forces and never controls Gaza again, And the PA must demilitarise, hold democratic elections and undertake wholesale reform to governance, finance and education. The leadership of the Arab League has added strength to these commitments. Their demand for Hamas to surrender its weapons and end its rule in Gaza has helped create this historic opportunity, a chance to deliver self-determination for Palestine in a way that permanently disarms Hamas and drives them from the region once and for all.
Now, of course, plenty of people have criticised this move, saying that it rewards Hamas for its terrible behaviour and sets a very bad precedent in foreign policy. Here's how Fox News reported it when they spoke to the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio Tuesday morning.
This comes as top allies to the United States formally recognize a Palestinian state, drawing swift criticism from Israeli leadership. So what does this mean ahead of this week's high-stakes summit?
Let's bring in the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
We have France, we have the UK, we have Australia and Canada recognizing the Palestinian state. What does that say about our influence?
Well, these countries are doing it, frankly, because of domestic political pressure in their own countries. You know, because of migration policies, their countries have been flooded with foreigners who have become politically active and are insisting that their governments do these sorts of things. And so that's what they're responding to. But look, it's irrelevant. It's going to get a little bit of attention, but there is no Palestinian state. You can put all the, it's kind of an emblematic of what the president says about the UN. You can put out all the paper in the world you want. The only way there's ever going to be a permanent solution to this challenge between Palestinians and Israelis is a negotiated settlement, one in which the Palestinians are going to have a territory and they're going to govern it, but it cannot be one that's going to be used as a launch pad for attacks against Israel. And that's something that has to be negotiated with Israel. It isn't going to exist without Israel's participation. That's what these leaders should have spent their time working on, ending this war, eliminating Hamas, so you can get to that stage of talks about that topic. But for them, and for some of them in particular, more than others, it's sort of a vanity project that's trying to make themselves relevant. But here's the bottom line, and here's the truth. Okay, when it comes to actually getting peace done, when it comes to actually stopping this, they're not going to any of these other countries.
Of course.
They're coming to us, they're going to President Trump, and they're asking him to get involved and bring it to an end.
That's Marco Rubio, Secretary of State of the United States, speaking some truth there on Fox News. Donald Trump did address the United Nations later on Tuesday, and the Australian media covered it just as you'd expect, making jokes about escalators and teleprompters not working, and mocking the president's rhetorical style as being undiplomatic, thereby doing what a lot of Australian mainstream TV news always does, missing the point completely. Trump's whole message was that diplomacy, or at least the kind practiced by the United Nations in modern times, isn't working. And he went there precisely to mock them and shame them to their faces. In his usual self-promotional style, Trump spoke of global conflicts and skirmishes that he'd successfully intervened on, and he lamented the lack of UN support.
Later, I realized that the United Nations wasn't there for us. They weren't there. I thought of it really after the fact, not during these negotiations, which were not easy. That being the case, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action.
Our naive Australian mainstream media keep analysing Trump by existing standards of politeness and behaviour when his whole reason for being president is that he is a disruptor of norms within society, within government bureaucracy, and within organisations like the United Nations. Things that have become stale and too comfortable and even rotten. Diplomacy that supports incompetence, inertia, and lazy compliance with the status quo isn't actually good. In fact, it can be even evil. And that's sadly what we've got in the United Nations sometimes, an enabler of bad regimes and evil. By putting rogue states on a level footing with more noble ones, are we really helping? Trump went on to address his administration's work on trying to bring peace to Gaza and the problem with the approach of governments like Australia's.
As everyone knows, I have also been deeply engaged in seeking a ceasefire in Gaza. Have to get that done. Have to get it done. Unfortunately, Hamas has repeatedly rejected reasonable offers to make peace. We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th, even while they refuse to release the hostages or accept a ceasefire. Instead of giving to Hamas and giving so much, because they've taken so much, they have taken so much. This could have been solved so long ago. But instead of giving in to Hamas's ransom demands, those who want peace should be united with one message: release the hostages now.
Trump also addressed the Ukraine war, and he had some very strong words for China, India, and the EU about the part that they're playing that's continuing to lead to the deaths of tens of thousands of young men.
The only question now is how many more lives will be needlessly lost on both sides. China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one? In the event that Russia is not ready to make a deal to end the war, then the United States is fully prepared to impose a very strong round of powerful tariffs, which would stop the bloodshed, I believe, very quickly. But for those tariffs to be effective, European nations, all of you are gathered here right now, would have to join us in adopting the exact same measures. I mean, you're much closer to this. We have an ocean in between. You're right there. And Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing to them, and it was very embarrassing to them when I found out about it, I can tell you that. They have to immediately cease all energy purchases from Russia. Otherwise, we're all wasting a lot of time.
People recognize the charade and impotence of the UN, and they want someone to walk in there and kick them in the butt. They don't want another promoter of moral equivalence and relativism. People are rejecting that now, and that's why Trump was elected in the US, and it's why Europe is changing now too. SmartKits Australia is a leading supplier of prefabricated home improvement kits, so you can do it yourself, save money and hassle. SmartKits Australia is the easiest way to improve your home and build memories that last forever. Buy online, customize your way, get it built. That's the SmartKits way. Decks, patios, pergolas, flyover roofs, carports, and insulated roofing, all prefabricated, fully engineered, and delivered anywhere in Australia. You can choose from hundreds of pre-designed SmartKits on their website, or you can go custom with SmartKits' in-house design team. Every kit is engineered tough, packed smart, and delivered free anywhere in Australia. And don't worry if you're not so handy. If you need it installed, they can do that too. Their licensed builder network can get you started even faster. It's up to you. So save thousands on your own 100% Australian-made smart kit. Build your own outdoor lifestyles with SmartKits Australia. SmartKits.com.au, a proud sponsor of The Other Side. The American late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air, bigger and bolder and stronger than ever. Trying to directly have political critics taken off the air isn't smart. It's censorship and it's wrong. And it's stupid because it can cut both ways, no matter what side of the political fence you're on. I'll get to Jimmy Kimmel in a moment. But while the American left were hand-wringing over the injustice of this poor TV star being taken off the air for 72 hours, oh, the pain, the suffering, must have been immense for him, there was a much bigger story about censorship that was coming out this week that nobody cared to think much about or even cover. Google's chief lawyer, Daniel Donovan, told a US congressional committee hearing on Tuesday that Google removed YouTube accounts, Google owns YouTube, really big popular YouTube accounts, not because they breached any rules, but because the Biden administration told them to. These included the huge accounts of conservative commentators like Dan Bongino, Steve Bannon, and Sebastian Gorka. The lawyer admitted that these accounts were banned under the guise of spreading misinformation during COVID. But they weren't really breaking any of the YouTube's rules, and they were actually taken off because it was demanded by Joe Biden's team. Wow. So what are we doing exactly to make sure this never happens again? Where's the outrage from the mainstream media about this? Where's the people marching in the streets to stop political censorship like they have been outside Jimmy Kimmel's studio this past week? Oh, they're nowhere, because it's not their side of politics. It's the non-left side that's being negatively affected, so that's okay. When did we lose our mental ability to think through things on principle instead of political ideology? When did we lose the ability to put left and right political leanings aside and say, well, that's just plain wrong on principle, and I'm standing up for free speech? I guess the left lost it around the same time that they lost the ability to notice that shooting a young man in broad daylight is bad, no matter what politics he was preaching. We all have to do better and think better and be less emotionally reactive. I'm not saying it's wrong to get emotional or to fight for your position, but we've got to remember that if we start using nasty tactics or violence, the other side will too. Peace is kept because we understand that if I threaten or hurt someone, they could do the same to me. That's why we have parliaments and political systems and criminal justice systems, and why it is so very, very important that we don't abuse those systems and let them be corrupted and abused by people. And the little injustices matter, right? You know, like local councils and state governments abusing their power to impose fines on people to raise tax revenues, penalising young families with obscene four-figures fines for traffic infringements. Those little everyday things add up and they destroy our civil social contracts, the fabric that keeps our society healthy. Back to Google, their chief lawyer, Daniel Donovan, told the US Congressional Committee that those banned YouTube accounts are now all being reinstated. But a lot of the misinformation they were accused of were things that turned out to be true. But, you know, no biggies, just little stuff like there being a higher risk of vaccine side effects for young men. And that kooky Wuhan lab leak theory, that turned out to be totally correct. As an editorial in the New York Post put it this week, whatever you think of Trump administration jawboning about the actual misinformation pushed by Jimmy Kimmel, at least it's out in the open. The Biden team's pressure campaign worked mainly behind closed doors and was more institutionalized and larger scale, with FBI agents and White House staff dedicated full-time to that censorship. That is far more insidious and perilously removed from any public accountability. And it's much more important than the Jimmy Kimmel story. But the free speech principle extends even to Kimmel and even to the revolting and grossly misleading comments he made about the Charlie Kirk murder. We have to respect the principle, even though the left never do. Otherwise, what are we in the non-left side of politics actually fighting for? Now, another important distinction that we've got to make when discussing free speech, being taken off the air by your boss for saying really offensive stuff is actually okay, because nobody owes anybody a platform to be a jerk and perpetuate lies. This only becomes a free speech issue if Jimmy Kimmel was being jailed or prosecuted by the government for the things he said, or if he was being taken off air because of government pressure being exerted. Now, I initially thought that Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air for the same reason Stephen Colbert was. He wasn't rating very well. He's been rude and insulting to half the country for years with completely one-sided political bias in his comedy, and he's not very funny. I just thought that the stations that carry his show thought his disgusting comment about the Charlie Kirk murder was the final straw. and a good opportunity to just pull the plug. Just a reminder, here's what he said.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Right. It was the right that were trying to score political points from it. The MAGA gang, as he likes to call the half of the country that doesn't vote the way he does. They were desperately trying to categorize this kid as anything but one of them. Them, the right, the left. This utterly divisive language is the language of a guy who constantly laments the political division in his country, so much that he cries about it because, you know, he's one of the good guys on the left. He's sensitive. What a self-unaware hypocrite. Yes, the deplorable people on the right in America, after one of their most loved commentators and young activists was shot in cold blood, dared to think that it might be that this kid was not one of theirs, that he was some kind of radical leftist with deep political motivations to take out Charlie Kirk. As it turned out, he was some kind of radical leftist with deep political motivations to take out Charlie Kirk. And actually, it was the political left who were desperate to make out that this kid was a gun-loving MAGA type and politicize the whole thing. Now, this is so typical of the kind of endless one-sided political garbage we get from Kimmel and America's late-night talk show mob. Kimmel is just Colbert with slightly better writers, so some of his jokes are actually, funny. But that comment was disgusting. I'm sorry, it really was. It was not free speech or even good political satire, and we don't get an apology. When he made his return, he didn't apologize. We got a self-pity fest and everything being made about protecting free speech. And it worked because of how foolishly Trump and the FCC boss actually behaved during this whole thing. So was the decision to drop Kimmel's show a commercial one taken by the affiliates, a moral one based on a sense of decency, or was it because of political interference? In summary, at this point, we don't know. Of course, the left were quick to push the narrative hard that it was because of political interference and an infringement of free speech.
JIMMY Kimmel stays, Trump must go. Our American constitutional right of freedom of speech is being taken from everyone.
Daily Show host Jon Stewart made an impromptu midweek appearance to hit back.
Are the naysayers and the critics right? Is Donald Trump stifling free speech?
Of course not, John. Americans are free to express any opinion we want.
This White House has been aggressive in attacking not just late-night comedians, but other media as well. Donald Trump is currently suing the New York Times for $15 billion and the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion over its coverage linking him with Jeffrey Epstein.
I will be joined later by the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern will be joining. Find out why she forced their ABC affiliate to pull Flight of the Conchords. She did that.
Ha 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 ha. Very funny. Why is Jacinda Ardern always on Jon Stewart's Daily Show? I'd love to watch, guys, but I've got to shampoo the cat. Can you think of anything worse than that? Jacinda Ardern and Jon Stewart. God. Okay. The satire news site, the Babylon Bee, put the hypocrisy of the left on all of this very well, I thought, with this meme. People okay with murder, outraged by TV show cancellation. Classic stuff. Anyway, back to the important stuff. Was there political interference? Here's how our Australian ABC reported on comments by Brendan Carr. He's the man who's the head of the FCC, which is America's controller of broadcasting licenses.
The assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk is off limits for late night, according to the US media regulator.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Within hours, Jimmy Kimmel's program was off the air.
Oh, whoa, that sounds terrible. Like the mafia. We could do this the easy way or the hard way. Brendan Carr might want to choose his words a little more carefully in future. Okay, here's the story. Two of the bigger companies that own a bunch of these US ABC affiliate stations across America, a company called Nexstar, which owns 28 TV stations, another one called Sinclair that owns 38 stations, and they carry ABC shows. They pulled the Kimmel Show from their stations, and that makes up a huge part of the ABC's national footprint, okay? The American ABC. Now, here's the bit that means it might have been the result of undue political pressure. Nexstar needs FCC approval for a big TV station acquisition it's doing right now. They're trying to buy 64 more stations from another TV company. They don't want to upset the FCC right now, and neither does the other company, Sinclair, because they've also got some deals in the pipeline that might need FCC approval. And those threats from Carr were real. Some experts say this could be unconstitutional coercion, since speech by media personalities is largely protected under the First Amendment of the US Constitution. We could do with one of those here, by the way. Statements from the TV networks themselves imply that the decisions were not motivated by regulatory concerns. Sinclair's vice chairman called Kimmel's remarks on Charlie Kirk inappropriate and deeply insensitive, and Nexstar's broadcasting division president labelled him offensive and insensitive. But many Republicans and conservative commentators like Ted Cruz and Ben Shapiro criticised the FCC, and they said that the TV network's actions did look very motivated by fear of the regulator, and that is not okay. Of course, ABC's decision to cease production of the show temporarily made commercial sense because two of its major network affiliates didn't want it on the air. But that original decision by those affiliates looks like it may have been made in fear of the FCC. So what we've got to ask ourselves as people who don't share Kimmel's politics and don't even like him very much is what we would think if the shoe was on the other foot and the tables were turned around politically. I don't know, like if Joe Biden was trying to get the #1 primetime Fox News presenter, like, I don't know, Tucker Carlson sacked. That would not be okay, right? Anyway, Kimmel is back. His return monologue made him look good and Trump look bad. So it's been a PR victory for the left, unfortunately. Government censorship is wrong, and this doesn't pass the pub test. But I do think that Kimmel needs to be careful of crossing the line from political satire, which has got to be protected at all costs, even when we don't like it, and offending basic human decency, which deserves absolutely no protection. But ultimately, it is up to the American people, not the government, whether they want to consume Kimmel's rubbish. And I really don't like dumb moves to censor political opponents that end up making those political opponents look like the good guys when they're anything but. Last week, I drew your attention to horrible things that people on the Australian left said after the Kirk murder. My personal faith in humanity has dropped a lot this week. I always knew the left were nasty and lacked class, but I never knew they were as bad as some of them have shown us they can be in the past 2 weeks. There were just so many cases of just a fundamental lack of human decency that I don't want to drag them all up again. But it's not all of them, thankfully, and so I want to focus on one guy on the left who demonstrated to all of us how good people on one side of politics should react to the cold-blooded murder of good people on the other side of politics. I can't believe this even needs to be said, but here we are. Left-leaning comedian and talk show host Bill Maher had just had Charlie Kirk on his podcast a few weeks prior to his murder.
This is a day because a guy who sat there, Charlie Kirk, got shot today.
Yeah.
And I can't stop thinking about it.
Neither can I.
And we shouldn't. And if you're on the other side of the political divide and you don't care because the wrong team guy got shot, you. You're what's wrong with this country. Just the fight I have been having with the left, while I'm, of course, the irony, as a lot of people in my position, is still a liberal, just a traditional liberal, won't go along with their, like a lot of the stuff that's just crazy out there too far, which gets Trump elected, blah, blah, blah. As I always say to my woke friends, we voted for the same person. You're just why she lost. They're the people who don't want to talk. It's my main issue with them. And Charlie Kirk was a guy who, like, he was always talking. And I talked to him here. You know, the right-wingers say what you want about them, but they talk to you. They're not into this leftist think. The left really has much more of a, I don't talk to you, I don't want to deal with you, you're deplorable, I can't break bread with you. That attitude, and like all the right-wingers, they don't have that attitude. Now, again, I didn't vote for them. And Charlie Kirk and I certainly don't agree on much politically, but he sat here, he's a human being, he's not a monster.
And a husband and a father.
Yes, and I liked him. I liked them all. They're all nice people when you meet them in person.
Respect Bill Maher. And that was the guy from the Smashing Pumpkins, by the way. Well said. Did you know that with a virtual private network or VPN on your computer, tablet, or phone, you can log into your favorite streaming services like Netflix from home with an internet address from anywhere in the world and watch all the shows that they offer in other countries, including stuff in different languages? And using a VPN to route all your internet traffic through a third-party server means that big corporations and big government can't spy on you. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they're the best VPN servers out there. As a viewer of the other side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to PIAVPN.com/other side. That's PIAVPN.com/other side. It's a great service, a rock bottom price, and supporting our sponsor, you are helping to keep the other side going and growing. Just a quick reminder that we will be taking our spring break next week. So no show next Friday night, but we'll be back with episode 429 on the following Friday, October 10. The latest news poll by the Australian newspaper shows that what we predicted on this show for some time now in terms of what would happen to the mainstream conservative parties in this country, the Liberals and the Nationals, is in fact happening. Instead of the coalition's push to the left flank and Susan Lee's insistence on a modern approach, helping them pick up voters and pick up young people, it's had the complete opposite effect. The coalition parties have seen men running a mile and younger Aussies abandoning the party in droves. It's worst in the eastern states. Only 25% of voters in New South Wales now support the coalition. Remember, at the end of last year, Peter Dutton's Conservative strong approach had the coalition on 40% primary vote and rising on track for victory. The party's weaklings on the left moved in and asked for the message to be toned down to save unwinnable inner city seats that had fundamentally changed forever anyway. And with muddled messages and bad campaign leadership, Dutton looked weak, inconsistent, rudderless, and as a result, he of course lost. Blind Freddie could have seen it coming. There's no gender gap in who likes the coalition either. They're equally disliked by both genders. It's 29% of men and 29% of women who say they'll vote for them. Joining me now to discuss all this is longtime One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts. Malcolm, thank you for coming in and joining us on the other side.
Great. Thank you for having me, Damien.
So all this bad news for the coalition has been somewhat good news for One Nation. The Australian reports that One Nation's increased its primary vote since the federal election from 6.4 to 9%. That's almost a 50% jump. In New South Wales, you're on 10%. Other conservative and libertarian-leaning parties and independents have also seen their primary votes jump as well. I think in New South Wales, the collective is 20% now, which is almost at the level that the coalition's at. I mean, interesting times for you.
Very interesting and really satisfying. There's a global move, there's a national move, there's a conservative move, and there's a One Nation move. They all need to be factored in. Actually, some of the polls we've seen have actually been higher than the numbers you've quoted, Damien.
Okay.
Which is marvellous. In New South Wales, for example, I think One Nation is at 16%. Wow. But internationally, people are tired of the fake conservatives, the Tories, the Republicans, or the Republicans are a bit different because the party is not. It has quite a bit of variety across it. Same with the Democrats. Some of the Democrats will vote with Trump, so that's understandable. But Trump is not really a Republican. He's not really a Democrat. He's an independent, and you have to be registered as a party in one of the two parties to get in. So he's there. Nigel Farage is there in Britain. Pauline Hanson's been here for a long time. So that's the first thing. Globally, people are saying, we've had enough. We've had a gutful of the lies from the pseudo-conservatives. We want the real conservatives.
I think people can see through the fakeness too. I mean, they're sick of the fakeness, the lack of authenticity. One of the things that non-supporters of Trump said initially was, I don't agree with Donald Trump, but I like the fact that I know where he stands and what he stands for, and he seems authentic, and I can believe that when he says something, he pretty much means it. Even if he's a bit fast and loose on the factual side of the truth, they know that he's genuinely coming from a place of consistency and you know what you're buying. You know what the label
Exactly,
is, what you get.
Damien. I've got more grey hair than you have by a long way, but
Not
so I'm no, so I'm aware of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. I was in my early 30s in Ronald Reagan. Late 20s, mid 20s, in fact, with Reagan. And Reagan and Thatcher. And I'll always remember comments from more than one person, former Brits who've moved out here, and they used to vote Labor. And they told me, Labor in Britain, and they told me that they voted Labor until Thatcher came along. They said they didn't like all her policies, but you knew where you stood.
Yeah.
And it's the uncertainty removed. So the global trend, the trend within the country, because of what you said with the fake Liberals, I think what happens when you get a Conservative, whether it be Abbott or Dutton, is that the Wets and the Liberals undermine him. It makes it very, very hard. So I don't put the blame with Dutton. I put the blame with, well, he should have called them out. But anyway, with the party itself. And the third thing is that Pauline's been around almost 30 years, 29 years.
Yeah.
And people have seen her, what she said back in 1996 is coming true. Everything she said. And she's been so consistent. They tried to jail her. They tried to...
they did jail her. Right?
That's right.
She actually served a couple of months or something.
She got out on appeal. They infiltrated her parties, destroyed it from within. That's Labor and Liberal. They also called her a racist and other labels, which are completely false. I mean, you're not one nation because you have division. You're one nation because you believe everyone has the same entitlements. So she's far from racist. But what they did was they called her racist in the hope that people would not vote for her. And that worked for a while. But now people are saying she's not racist. They realise that. And they're saying, I want someone who's truthful and accurate. And so they're moving to Pauline because of that. Yeah. And also, quite frankly, our policies, and I mean this sincerely, are the best I've ever seen in any political party in this country. They're comprehensive, holistic, and they're targeted.
Now, the news poll analysis reveals that particularly male voters seem to be moving away from the coalition under Susan Lee. And if Peter Dutton and ScoMo had a women problem, then Susan Lee's got a men problem. No one seems to care that much about that, though. But anyway, the gains that you've made, though, as opposed to the gains of other independent and minor right parties, they seem to have picked up men. But you've got gains from both genders. You're doing something right in terms of appealing to women as well. How do you read that?
Well, it's not because we've got a female party leader. It's because what we say, we go out and listen, and I mean really listen. The Coalition and the Labor Party pretend to listen, but people know they're not listening. They can't listen because they've already got their policies stitched up, and the policies are almost identical between Labor and Liberal. And we've been calling them the Uni Party because that's what they are. Pauline is the only opposition to the Uni Party, and people can see that. So that's something. But with regard to men, it's older people, younger people. Older people probably saying, my grandkids have got no chance of getting a house. The younger kids are saying, in their 20s, are saying, where do we get a house? How do I get a house? How do I even rent a house? How do I find a house? How do I rent it? How do I have children without the house?
And women are concerned about the future of young people, obviously. And so moving from gender to age breakdowns, if we look at those, the Liberal and National Party votes fallen the most among older voters, which is surprising. It's very grim, though, among people aged 18 to 34. So I think in March it was 28% of that group, that age group, and now it's only 18% 6 months later.
Less than a fifth.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. These policies are appealing to everyone right across the board, all ages. But they understand the energy problem has been manufactured. And what do the Liberals do? And I talk with Tony Abbott, I talk with John Howard, I talk with Corey Bernardi when he was a Liberal, and other people saying, why the hell don't you just tell the truth? We know you're skeptic. Why don't you come out and just say it? They can't mount the argument. Whereas we've come out and said climate change is a scam, it's rubbish, and demolished it. And now it's coming true.
Well, I think they let the other side set the agenda, and then they follow in a frightened way. They're not leading, and if you don't lead, if you don't have a strong position, then you can't really get people to follow you. And I think this sort of fear of trying to play the middle all the time on issues where maybe there's not a middle, and people need an alternative strongly put.
People want the truth. And we have been calling out the truth ever since I've been in politics, and Pauline ever since she's been in politics. When we're not afraid to say the truth. And what we do is, Pauline's insisting on this. I've always insisted on it because people in my past, people's lives depended upon me getting the data. So we get the data and then we open our gobs.
Another thing that's interesting too is the your share of the people aged over 65, which has doubled from 5 to 11%. So you're doing very well with the older demographic. And people say, oh, well, they'll be dead soon, forgetting the fact, of course, that more people come into that demographic. That demographic doesn't ever go away. The people in it change, but the demographic doesn't go away. And so it's important. I mean, this is an important part of our community. These are the elders. These are what we used to consider to be the wise ones that we shut up and listen to. We don't do that so much anymore. We listen too much to the young. But isn't that is that a sign that people are maturing into one nation, I guess, or maturing into more conservative ideas still as they get older?
Yes, and that's always been the case. We've been particularly high amongst the aged people over 60, over 65 for quite a while. But what we're seeing now is grandparents coming to us and saying, my kids, my grandchildren cannot get a housing, cannot get a future. They're paying ridiculous energy prices for this scam on climate change. Property rights are being stolen. They're concerned. Retired people have more time on their hands, and they do the research. And older people, you know, I'm a grandparent now. We've got one grandson, but I don't mean this in a negative way, but I've got more time, more interest, more focus on my grandson than on my own children. And then when they were his age.
You've got more time.
So I'm very concerned about his future, and that applies. That's what grandparents are telling us. Where do their grandkids get a house?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's funny because I often think doing this show, and I know you in politics, it's like we swim in a sea of left-wing assumptions, right?
We don't.
Well, no, personally we don't, but I mean the country does, and we think that just because these people have got the microphones and the television cameras, and you know that they control what people think, and they have a great influence over it. There's no question of it. But ultimately, I think people are waking up. I think we are seeing a shift. I think it'll be like America, where that shift comes politically before it comes through the media, or you know. But I think there's something being missed by our talking classes, our chattering classes, in relation to what is really going on at a grassroots level and what people really care about, right?
You're absolutely right. Everything I've agreed with everything you've said so far. The chattering classes they are a manifestation of the left. They're a vehicle for the left. I don't like calling them left and right because the terms are confusing.
Yeah, it's simplistic. It's really, we have to, some way of...
It's usually, I use the terms control versus freedom. And the right is usually free, and the left is usually control. Yeah. All of the major control freaks throughout human history, well, with very few exceptions, have been lefties. Have been control side of politics, communists, socialists. You look at Stalin, Mao, Hitler. Hitler was a lefty. He was a socialist. So mostly all of them have come from the left side of politics, the control side of politics, and they weave a very attractive tale because it's emotionally based. It's not factually based. And what they do is they create victims. They set up victims, whether it be transgenders or whatever. And then they appeal to those victims. And what they do is essentially cripple those people, Damien. Those people are made to be victims, and they're in victimhood. That means they're dependent on the government. And I don't mean just financially. I mean morally and in their own psyche. So it's really very crippling what they do.
They want to create a welfare state.
Exactly.
They want the dependency on government.
Exactly.
So they can control people.
Yeah, and in my first speech in Parliament in 2016, September, we're not supposed to, in our first speech, criticise people. Not directly anyway. Yeah. So I refrained. But I looked across at the Greens when I said part of the agenda in Parliament is anti-human, and I looked specifically at the Greens. And then my second speech, I labelled them as anti-humans. So the lefties are very much anti-human. If you look at Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Maurice Strong, lefties, all of them lefties, and they're anti-human.
Malcolm, I want to ask you, what is One Nation's plan to build on this momentum? I mean, you've got this great sort of turnaround happening now. Could this be the moment that we, because a lot of people keep asking me, when are we going to see a great party emerge that's going to dominate the conservative side of politics in Australia?
How do we keep the momentum? We keep doing what we are doing. We go out and listen, and then we speak accurately as representatives of the people. That's our basic job, to serve the people by putting in place policies and actions that meet people's needs, but above all, listen to people so we can understand their needs. That's the first thing. The second thing is keep telling the truth. We're known to be outspoken, but factually correct and data-based, so we'll keep doing that and keep developing good policies. Our policies are resonating with people of all ages.
I think that's a very important point. That keep it fact based, keep it as truthful as you can. At least you're putting a consistent message out, a consistent story out, and people can see it and they can trust you. More than any other comment I get, and you probably hear it too, is why don't the minor right leaning parties all join? Why don't they all join?
There are subtle differences, sometimes marked differences between us and the micro parties. So that's one thing. And in a democracy, you keep parties, ideologies, positions alive. You don't try to bury them. So
it doesn't hurt to have a bit of variety. We've got that preferential voting system, so that helps because people can, use it to kind of vote in the order.
Exactly. And so the way to work together, and we've said this for years now, is to recommend that our voters who vote for us vote for the other the micro parties, 2, 3, 4. Put them ahead of the Conservatives.
Yeah.
Put the fake Conservatives, the Liberal Nationals, and the Labor Party. So that's one way of doing it. But the other thing it's very important to remember is we reached out to all the micro parties, and they said, yeah, that'd be great. Recommend our party be preference. Yeah. Where did they put us? Rennick put us 6 in the seat of Rankin. He put us behind the Labor Party.
Oh, okay, that's not.
And on the Senate, he put us number 6. We put him number 2. Same with the other micro parties. And the reason is, and we said this before the election, Damien, that we were the only party that was capable of getting a senator elected in every state. And we got 3 states senators elected. We came very close in each of the other 3. 2 incredibly close. And so
what people might not know who watch this show is that in Queensland, the Senate race was very tight for the last spot between you and Jared Rennick.
Well, it ended up not being tight at all. We didn't even rely on his preferences.
Right. So you cleanly won.
And he merged with Katter's. So when you look at his personal vote, it was very small as a party. But the other thing to remember is that
that division is not helpful, though. I think a lot of people would say, that we would like to see you and Jared working together. But we understand that people have different views in politics. Obviously, your decision to put him second is a signal that you stand by your values. That it's not about the political game in the end, right? And I guess that's where, he's probably got to consider where he stands, and I'll give him the opportunity to come on and talk about that again sometime, I guess. But yeah, no, I get it. It's tough. And
he also told some lies about One Nation. And kept them going, even though I pointed them out, and he mentioned that he agreed that they were lies, that he kept them alive. So Pauline doesn't do that. I don't do that. We tell the truth, and that's what we're famous for.
Okay, well, good. Keep it up. We need more truth in politics. There's no question about that. I want to just play a clip of Donald Trump speaking we haven't talked much about the issues, but I do want to discuss quickly with you immigration. We've got time to do that.
Sure.
I'd like to play this clip of Donald Trump's speech to the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Oh, fantastic.
In which he said, he was talking about the question of immigration and open borders and where the United Nations is sort of, the ideas of the United Nations permeating through national governments has sort of led us. So let's have a listen to that one, John.
The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them and not finance them. In the United States, we reject the idea that mass numbers of people from foreign lands can be permitted to travel halfway around the world, trample our borders, violate our sovereignty, cause unmitigated crime, and deplete our social safety net. We have reasserted that America belongs to the American people, and I encourage all countries to take their own stand in defense of their citizens as well. You have to do that because I see it. I'm not mentioning names. I see it, and I can call every single one of them out. You're destroying your countries. They're being destroyed. Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it. And I have to say, I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed. So changed.
Yeah, the idea that anybody talking about immigration is a racist, or anybody suggesting that, that's got to shift. And he says there, we've got serious social problems emerging in places like London now that anybody can see, that are the result of too fast, too much immigration and trying to ram cultures together that don't really coalesce, right?
Yes, there are a number of problems with mass migration. I'm a migrant. I was born in India. Okay, my mother was North Queensland and my dad was Welsh, so he's a migrant as well. So we've got nothing against migrants. Migrants have built this country, literally, especially in the early days. But we used to have standards on who could come in. Now we don't have those standards. We're letting terrorists in, and we're condoning them, keeping them here, even when they break the law. So number one is the problem is mass migration. He called it an invasion, and so it is. And it's a deliberate invasion, and it's orchestrated by the UN and the World Economic Forum. So that's the first one. That's
so
killing.
That sounds like a wacky conspiracy theory, Malcolm, but the World Economic Forum is real. It's a global think tank, if you like, or meeting every year of the top 1,500 corporate leaders and the top 1,500 government leaders from around the world. They meet in Davos every year. They have other meetings, but that's the main one. And agendas are set.
Yes, correct.
Stuff is direct. It might not be, Klaus Schwab in his little room with his hat. Well, it could be, but I hope it's not. But it's certainly a subtle. There's a subtle message that's sent out about, like the United Nations. And the reason we criticize the United Nations is because they've strayed from what they're supposed to be about into this territory of, the sustainability goals, which are quite left-wing when you look at them, right? They shouldn't be doing that stuff. And the WF does the same thing. Here's some guidelines you might want to follow. Oh, here's some capital to follow those guidelines.
There are two things to remember about the UN. It was created to be a vehicle for transferring wealth from we the people around the world to the globalist billionaires and the globalist corporations, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, First State. They're interconnected. So that's the first thing. And that's been stated by many, many senior UN bureaucrats, particularly Maurice Strong. The second thing about the UN is that it's a vehicle to put in place an unelected socialist global governance. Now, that we haven't got time to unpack that, but I can unpack that. I've unpacked that in writing many times. Their model for unelected socialist global governments, they've stated, is the EU, which is a unicameral parliament where the bureaucrats do the dictating and the rest of it is the parliament is the facade.
They're not elected, yeah.
So these are actually what's going on. The second thing is that it's destroying our culture, mass migration, and that's deliberate because then when individuals, basically there are two ways of structuring, two basic structures for society, human society, family and nation state, and both are being destroyed deliberately by the United Nations. These are campaigns. Their Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, are just ways of getting parliaments, and unfortunately our parliament is complying with it, passing legislation to put in place those controls. The third thing is it's the quality of the people coming in. We used to have migrants coming into this country who immediately went to work and improved our productive capacity. Now we've got grifters coming in, terrorists coming in. We've got people coming in who are saying that they want to kill us. I mean, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah,
and the fourth thing is multiculturalism. The strongest nations in the world are not multicultural, they're monoculture. They tolerate other religions, they tolerate other races, they tolerate other nationalities. But above all, they're proud of themselves. Taiwan, Japan, Korea, South Korea, China, Singapore, the United States. People said in the early days, Bob Hawke did it, and especially John Howard, America is multicultural. Rubbish. America, above all in America, you are American. You're very proud of your Polish ancestry, your Asian ancestry, your Indian ancestry, but you put them to the side because, number one, you're American. What we're doing is having our culture and our cohesion destroyed in front of our eyes, and it is deliberate because that way the nation state falls into the background. Borders being smashed in Europe, and the strong leaders like Orban in Hungary and the new president in Poland and others are saying no, we'll close our borders, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to send home around 100,000. People here illegally, 100,000, and that's just the start. We need to get into re-migration, send people back to where they came from.
All right, Malcolm Roberts, thank you very much.
Unless they're productive.
Unless they're productive, yeah. Well, that's a reasonable ask. Productive and peaceful and willing to integrate and assimilate to a certain extent with Australian culture.
Yeah.
It didn't come out of nowhere. All right. Malcolm, thanks so much for your time. Love to have you back on the show and talk more. Senator Malcolm Roberts there from One Nation in Queensland.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. A great way to support the other side is to support our sponsors like SmartKits Australia, the best supplier of do-it-yourself prefab home renovation kits. And it's not just carports. SmartKits do decks, patios and pergolas, flyover roofs and insulated roofing too. All prefabricated, fully engineered and delivered anywhere in Australia. And if you're not too handy, they'll install it for you too. Get onto it. smartkits.com.au.
You're watching The Other Side with Damien Coorey, Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month. This is The Other Side.
Quick reminder again that we are taking our spring break next week, so no show next Friday night, but we'll be back with episode 429 on the following Friday, October 10. As we've long predicted on this show, there is not likely to be much change in interest rates in this country that is sustained and long-term because, let's face it, while inflation data might seem to be looking a little bit better, we can all feel what's really happening in the economy. Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock seemed to confirm as much this week as she sat down for a 4-hour session to answer questions from politicians in a House of Representatives Standing Committee hearing. She said that while she thinks inflation is now firmly within the 2 to 3% range that the RBA is supposed to use as its main benchmark, and she thinks it'll stay there, she says that to absolutely make sure it does stay there will be the bank's main focus. And so that's a signal that interest rates won't be moving downward after the bank meets next Monday and Tuesday. On the upside, consumer spending picked up in June a little bit this year, and Michelle Bullock thinks that this will be sustained because wages are rising more than inflation now, and this means that households' disposable incomes are rising, but the economic outlook continues to be clouded by uncertainty, so we need to be alert to the risk that circumstances might change, and we need to be prepared to respond if necessary, she said. So in short, some good signs, but don't get too excited. And as a result of that sentiment, nobody is expecting a further drop in rates this week from the RBA. Well, very few people are. Investors do, however, seem to be pricing in a pretty good chance of a rate cut this year, one more at least, probably from the November meeting. The base rate was at 4.35% at the start of this year, you'll remember. There were 0.25% cuts in February, May, and August, bringing the base rate down to where it is now at 3.6%. I'm not optimistic about inflation long term because it's been low because of artificial government interventions. They've been subsidizing the cost of electricity, and then there's the immigration question, and all of that subsidy is coming to a stop now. In the month of July alone, electricity prices rose 13% in 1 month. Why? Because government subsidies stopped in several states. When electricity prices go up, the price of everything goes up because everything requires electricity. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of hearing young Labor and Greens voters complaining about rising costs of living 1 minute and then demanding net zero the next. And they never make a link between the two things. And it's not just net zero, it's the general hatred of capitalism, business, and love of massive government and the welfare state. But no, it's cool. Keep on calling anyone who calls for more sensible energy policy a selfish right-winger and climate denier. Never mind the fact that there's actually quite a bit of science now that challenges the idea of climate change being primarily man-made, and never mind the reality that there's nothing that Australia can possibly do about it that'll have any impact whatsoever. You want to be clever? Fine, no worries. But you don't get to have it both ways. You can't demand climate action now on the one hand and bemoan the cost of living on the other. Stubborn ignorance as consequences. And there's more pain ahead. Michelle Bullock was asked if electricity prices will rise again in the next few months because the federal rebates will be ending in January too. Chris Bowen and ALBO have spent $7 billion on federal handouts to subsidise electricity. Michelle Bullock said that Aussies will be paying more for everything as a result, and vulnerable people will face the brunt of that, as they always do face the brunt of the policies of the left. The point is that even if inflation comes down, the rate of inflation comes down The prices that have already gone up aren't coming down. The social impacts of left-wing governments, that means big interventionist government rather than small hands-off government, are huge. Government overspending and mismanagement and inefficiency and spending on the wrong things always leads to waste and debt. And reality means that that has to be paid for by the productive side of the economy. There is no free lunch in life. The price of milk and bread and petrol and electricity is not coming down, and it went up for a reason. All those fake government freebies and nice-sounding ideas that people like to vote for, they have to be paid for in the end by all of us. Michelle Bullock also told the Pollies that high house prices are a supply issue. Surprise, surprise. Something else we've been saying for ages, but which the left likes to try to deny. Nobody wants to build and invest in housing in this country. There are too many government costs, best described as stealing from home buyers. Federal, state, and especially local government charges are pretending to be there for safety, but they actually exist just to give the government more money to make itself bigger and more powerful. ALBO and Jimbo's brilliant solution to this supply problem? Increased demand. Wow, with their harebrained scheme for first homeowners. There's only two ways to get prices down. Ask a Year 10 economics student. You can either increase supply or reduce demand. So what do these geniuses running our country do? They put in place a Band-Aid measure that'll increase demand. Some economists say that with this housing subsidy for first home buyers, there'll be a corresponding increase in supply to meet some of that demand. And other economists say, no, there won't. But one thing is for sure, it's dumb policy because it's a solution that worsens the underlying problem that it's trying to solve. A better solution would be to let the price of houses come down smoothly and slowly to a more sensible level by doing everything possible to boost supply. But there's no political benefit in that for the government because existing homeowners don't want their home values to drop, of course. Well, a smooth, sensible market correction that's gentle and not too big is a lot better than a crisis-induced crash, and it's a heck of a lot better than the social unrest that unaffordable housing will eventually lead to. A cute little sideline note to all this, speaking of government bodies wasting money, the Reserve Bank itself has been renovating its offices in Sydney. Original budget, $260 million. Current estimated cost, $500 million. How the heck can that be allowed to go unpunished? Simple solution. Rent out the offices to a private company, pocket the rent on behalf of taxpayers, and make all the Reserve Bank staff shack up in an office not so flash in the suburbs. Simple. If you like The Other Side, one of the best ways you can support us is by signing up for the products of our sponsors. And one of our best sponsors is PIAVPN, the virtual private network that stops people spying on your internet activity. It'll keep you and your family truly safe from the prying eyes of big governments and corporations without slowing down your internet speeds. And you can watch Netflix or other streaming services using your regular accounts with them as if you're viewing from any country in the world. You can sign up for less than $3 a month and get a whopping 83% off the normal price. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside to sign up and you'll get the discount. And you'll get more info on those special deals if you check it out. That's piavpn.com/otherside. Across Australia, our education departments publish annual reports which list achievement gaps where kids in one group might be underperforming against kids in another group. These achievement gaps are measured by Indigenous status, by wealth and social status, by disability, geography, and even language background. But surprisingly, never by gender. Yet data does exist that shows girls are streaking ahead of boys in almost every subject in final year exam results. There's now hardly a subject where boys come out on top, apart from a couple of advanced maths and physics units. Yet far more important than who's on top of the pile is the deteriorating position of the boys at the bottom. Boys are underperforming girls significantly at the bottom end of things. The latest NAPLAN school tests show twice as many boys as girls seriously failing in writing and numeracy at every level, years 3, 5, 7 and 9. Almost half of all Year 9 boys fail grammar at 47% versus 36% of girls. Joining me to discuss this troubling state of affairs and the complete unwillingness of our education bureaucrats to want to do anything about it or even care is men's rights activist and Other Side regular, Bettina Arndt. Bettina, thanks again for joining us on the show.
Great to be here, Damien.
Great article you put together there. 47% of boys at Year 9 level fail grammar versus 36% of girls. Before we get into the gender difference on that, both those numbers are frighteningly high. It's a bit of a worry, isn't it?
Yeah, of course they are. I mean, we're pouring money into education and doing worse and worse. It's just extraordinary. But I'm sure we all know the reasons for that. Our state education departments are absolutely controlled by ideologues, and they spend all their money on, a curriculum that is full of rubbish rather than concentrating on the basics. We've seen endless fads when it comes to teaching reading and so on, and the kids are the ones that suffer.
Yeah. Well, we're not teaching the teachers well either. A lot of the teachers have their own issues with numeracy and literacy, and then they're the ones teaching. So we've got serious problems in our teachers' colleges as well. But let's talk about this gap, because things are pretty bad for the boys right now and getting a bit worse. What's happening there?
Well, they've been getting worse for a long time. And yet, I mean, what I've been intrigued by is the unwillingness of our education bureaucracy to deal with that. And of course, I mean, many of them are absolutely celebrating that girls are streaking ahead. And I started writing about this 40 years ago when I first was working in full-time journalism.
Right.
And, started going out and talking to people about this growing education gap. Parents kept writing to me saying, once if you went to a speech night, you'd have girls and boys winning prizes. And now it's almost all girls who are up there. And parents notice this. They notice the fact that boys are the ones filling the remedial classes or dropping out from school or getting endlessly suspended. They're not engaged in schooling. No effort is made to keep them engaged.
Is that the problem, you reckon? Is that what it is behind it all? It's this level of engagement. The kids are not engaged. Boys are not engaged, and they're not engaged because they're not being focused upon like they used to be.
Well, we're not. Yeah, we're. Look, it's an interesting history, really, because under the Howard government, the public disquiet and the parents' disquiet about this issue led to a proper parliamentary inquiry, and they had thousands of submissions from parents and from teachers who are concerned about all of this. And that led to a whole lot of discussion about what should be done. And, at the heart of this engagement are various differences between boys and girls in the way they learn and what we should then be doing when it comes to, making up that gap. How do we teach boys differently so they don't fall further and further behind? And as you say, one of the issues, of course, is good teaching, but also teaching that copes with, that what focuses on some of the problems we know boys have with attention. I mean, everybody knows that boys tend to be harder to get down and sit down and concentrate, particularly little boys. That's why half of the population of kids is boys who's on Ritalin now.
And that's not good either, right? It's not a great way to handle a situation. Yeah, I mean, nearly.
Let's drug them all and keep them quiet.
Yeah,
don't care how they do. And it's just madness. So it's about how do we? I mean, obviously there are issues also in terms of hardly any men in schools teaching in schools anymore for very good reasons, as well as. This whole business of we need particular ways of teaching to engage the boys. All the trend in modern education has been towards, kids sitting down and doing little essays together, little projects together, and that sort of cooperative going on off and doing your own thing type of approach to teaching, rather than really teacher-directed approach, which helps engage the boys and force the boys to concentrate. I mean, a whole lot of things we could talk about.
Yeah, well, that thing about, you know, the sort of student-directed, student-led learning can be positive in some ways, but it's definitely better for girls than it is for boys. Boys do need that more focused, teacher-directed stuff. Maybe girls do too, looking at the terrible results.
And that all came out in this inquiry. And of course, the Howard government's setting it all in place, lighthouse schools, you know, rewarding schools that were trying to find new ways to help boys. And of course, when the government changed, it was all tossed out the window. And that has been the pattern, you know.
Yeah, government, you know, don't leave anything to government if you want it done. I mean, the right way to handle this, I think, actually one of the things that the libertarians have got right in their philosophy and approach to, and some of the Liberal Party people too that want to do this, but, you know, getting the schools more competitive, so parents, putting the choice back in the hands of parents. Instead of funding schools, you fund parents. You give them vouchers. Parents decide which schools. That's right. It's a great system. Parents decide which schools they want to send their kids to, and it becomes a competitive market for excellence. And we start getting schools competing. We get good teachers paid more, bad teachers paid less, as they should be. Not everyone paid the same. We get high-level teachers really being in demand. We get schools with one approach. You get choice for parents, different types of schools doing different types of teaching, and parents can choose. Instead of having it all state-regulated and centralised like we do now, which is just a complete disaster, as we can see with these results. Yep. Some of these stats in your article, Bettina, I just want to run through. Nearly half, 44% of boys in Year 7 failed to reach minimum writing standards. In reading, boys are around 13 months behind similar-age girls. On the maths and numeracy side of things, you know, boys used to be way ahead, and we were really worried about that. God forbid boys should have a tendency to be better at anything than girls, but we've got to stop that. Well, we certainly have. Boys are no longer as far ahead as they once used to be in that area. Almost as many males as females are now seriously failing the NAPLAN numeracy test at every grade level. So the equality people would be very happy with that equality that they've achieved there. You've got the boys now failing as much as the girls. Congratulations, the rush to the bottom.
But also, David, at the top, I mean, look at the HSC, the school leaving results, and you find girls are leaving, being the top achievers in almost every subject, except for a few, maths, high-level maths science subjects. And that's about it. And of course, there too, they worked really hard to not broadcast those results.
Okay.
No one wants to focus on this.
That's what I want to talk about because, no one wants to focus on this. And I think it was you quoted Christina Hoff Sommers, the American activist who, in her book, The War Against Boys, she said, we can no longer allow the partisans of girls and the supporters of girls to be the ones writing the rules. She's basically arguing that feminists are the ones controlling the American education system and distorting these research findings to suppress how badly boys are actually doing in school. So there's a whole other layer of problem we've now got. And that was a quarter of a century ago she wrote that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We've got the same problem in Australia.
Absolutely. And about 20 years ago, I interviewed this senior bureaucrat in the education department, and I said, what will we do if the gap keeps widening between boys and girls? And she said, we'll wait 2,000 years and analyse the results very, very carefully. And she goes, ha, 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 this is just a joke. But of course, it's not a joke. That's exactly what they're doing, sitting there watching girls fall further and further ahead, the governments are continuing to pour money into STEM, approaches to help get more girls into STEM subjects and rewarding schools that get girls doing well and so on, and really trying desperately not to notice what's happening to boys.
You actually listed out some recent examples of, clear examples in Australia of government authorities ignoring this problem. There was a Productivity Commission report on education equity that the good old Productivity Commission did. That failed to include any gender-specific data on literacy gaps at all. There was the Australian Education Research Organisation, the ASA report on student writing deficits, failed to include the highly unequal outcomes for boys. A Grattan Institute exploration of gender gaps prioritised girls trailing in maths, talked all about that, completely ignored the literacy gap for boys, the fact that boys were trailing in literacy and language. And the federal government's STEM and Equity Monitor which is aimed at boosting girls' participation in maths and STEM, has got absolutely no equivalent program for boys, for literacy at all. It's just nuts. You were in Canberra recently lobbying, weren't you? How did that go?
Yeah, no, well, I had some people in Parliament, MPs, who were promising to ask questions about this in Parliament, so we'll see how that goes. I mean, I'm just trying to get some interest in these topics, but it's not easy. We're really up against it. Albanese government has just poured more money into women in STEM projects, including projects in schools. It just goes on and on. I was talking to an academic who said to me, if any PhD student was to think of doing research on boys' education, that would be a career-ending move. I mean,
oh, my God.
Such is the prejudice against addressing this problem. I mean, that's what just drives me crazy, that we have our education bureaucracy only interested in the education of girls. But don't any of these people have boys?
Bettina, thanks again for shining a spotlight on this one. And, again, we hope and pray that we'll get some action. Bettina, thanks so much for your time again. Always great to see you. Bye.
Thanks, David.
And that's all for this episode of The Other Side, your analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. We'll be taking our spring break next week, so no show next Friday night. But we will be back with episode 429 on Friday, October 10. So just 1 week away. Clips from this show will be dropping throughout the week as usual. There's plenty of old content to catch up on, so you can go back and have a look at some of our older stuff you might have missed in that week that we're taking off. You can check us out on YouTube, our main platform. We're also on X and Rumble channels with a lot of our clips. And if you do like what you see, we need your help. We're a voluntarily viewer-supported show. We don't get, taxpayer money like the big ABC do. There are now 2 ways to support us financially. One's to go to our website at othersidetv.com.au and sign up for less than $5 a month. Or you can now subscribe right here on YouTube, if that's where you're watching, by simply pressing the join button below beside the subscribe button. It's that easy. Or the QR code at the bottom of the screen throughout the show will always take you to our website to sign up if you want to do that. Then YouTube doesn't take a cut, but it's your call. I'm Damien Curry. Have a good break. Bye for now.
The Other Side with Damien Curry is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month.